Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX World. I'm Megha Sharma and this is the World Report. Let's take a look at the top stories of the hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky once again emphasizes on meeting with, he says, Russian counterpart, says he will meet Vladimir Putin anywhere except in Moscow. Meanwhile, Russia responds by naming Istanbul as the preferred venue for potential talks. A detainee has been killed. There are two others that are critically injured after a sniper opens fire at an ICE center in Dallas. US President Donald Trump condemns the shooting and attributes it to the rising violence to what he called left-leaning Democrats. Heading to the United Nations, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismisses the Palestinian recognition as shameful capitulation. This comes as over 150 countries recognize Palestine as a state. Yemen's Houthis have launched a drone attack on Israel's Eilat, leaving at least 22 people injured. While claiming the responsibility for the attack, Houthi military spokesperson said that this is the second such operation in the past 24 hours targeting Israel. After multiple drone attacks on Gaza-bound flotilla, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni condemned the strikes. She said, however, criticized the flotilla mission as dangerous and irresponsible. Denmark's Aalborg airport closes after reports of drones in airspace. This came 2 days after incursions in Copenhagen and Oslo. US President Donald Trump accuses UNGA of triple sabotage, citing multiple technical issues during his visit to the United Nations, including a stalled escalator and malfunctioning of the teleprompter. Trump said that he is sending a copy of concerns to the UN Secretary General. Super typhoon Rogasa has now made a landfall in China's southern provinces as recovery and repair drives begin in Taiwan and Philippines after the typhoon crossed these countries. The typhoon is expected to weaken as it makes its way to Laos over the next couple of days. Big story of the hour. The United Nations General Assembly, where the biggest development comes from the 5th Crimea Platform Summit, which was held at the UN headquarters yesterday and saw participation from more than 60 participants, including around 40 heads of state and government, as well as representatives of international organizations. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called for action to ensure that Russia knows that the world remembers it will not forgive, is what he said, and is fighting for international law and basic human justice to prevail. Listen in to what he said.
Russia very much wants to make war the new normal, and this is exactly what we must resist, not allowing killings and Russian occupation to become something the world can simply turn a blind eye to. There must be no normalization of Russia's war or of Russia's brazenness to wage it. There must be no easing or lifting of sanctions on Russia while the war and occupation continue.
The Ukrainian president had a packed day of engagements at the United Nations yesterday. He hosted the Crimea Platform Summit and his address at the general debate, where he reiterated his call for security guarantees as a mandatory part of any peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia.
Today, no one but ourselves can guarantee security. Only strong alliances, only strong partners, and only our own weapons. The 21st century isn't much different from the past. If a nation wants peace, it still has to work on weapons. It's sick, but that's the reality.
Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev joining me on the telecast. Ambassador Sachdev, it's interesting to know that there has been a call that has been made by Ukrainian President Zelensky for ending of the war. He has said that Moscow is not the venue that he is going to be meeting President Putin. It could be any other place but Moscow. In fact, the Putin administration at this point of time has zeroed in on a neutral location elsewhere outside of Russia. Do you think the United Nations General Assembly general debate, where these leaders are coming out and speaking up, is going to have any impact on a ceasefire that has been long anticipated?
Oh, thank you for having me. You have raised an important question. I think it will be replied to partly when a Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, would address the UN General Assembly special session. I think it's tomorrow. I think he's leading the Russian delegation, and many observers would be listening very carefully as to what he has to offer. If there's anything new about the breakthrough, this would be the first indication. Now, coming back to Mr. Zelensky, he's been interested in having a ceasefire and a peace deal as soon as possible. He was supported by the European Union heads of states, while they attended with him the conference in White House last month before Alaska summit. But after Alaska summit, Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin agreed to look beyond the ceasefire and go in for a peace deal. Well, there is no sign of any peace deal, and the war has been continuing with the Ukrainians mostly on defensive. There's also a bottleneck with regard to supply of weapons. Americans want European members of NATO to pay to America for getting American weapons to Ukraine. And this pipeline is not working smoothly, leading to some hiccups in supply management. Therefore, Mr. Zelensky's meeting with Mr. Trump earlier this week is significant, and Mr. Trump's total roundabout turn condemning Russia and giving them a month before he considers Mr. Putin to be distrustful, etc., etc., is typical of Mr. Trump, who talks in terms of extremities, very often using offensive language. But it has turned a full circle from February 28, when Mr. Zelensky was turned out of White House, to last Tuesday,
right,
the last Monday, when Zelensky was able to get Trump to denounce Putin and Russia and aggregate European members of NATO to do more in favor of Ukraine, and saying that Ukraine is poised to win back all the territories that Russia has held.
right.
So all that indicates a bit of flux that we need to monitor. Which way does it eventually descend?
Right. Stay on with me, Ambassador Sachdev. In fact, there's a more upheaval that has happened at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday, where US President Donald Trump has followed up his address at the UNGA with a tirade against what he's calling a series of sabotage at the UN headquarters. The incidents, he said, referred to his post on Truth Social include the escalator abruptly stopping while the president was climbing on it, and the teleprompter not working when he was beginning his address. On Truth Social, he posted about these 3 incidents, as well as the fact that the speakers in the UNGA hall were turned off during his address. Ambassador Sachdev, do you think this is mere coincidence, or is there some conspiracy that US President Donald Trump has pointed towards?
possible but not probable would be my verdict. It's far too important an address. You probably know that the tradition is that when the special session of United Nations General Assembly begins, the Secretary General is the first speaker, followed by American President. In his capacity as the host country, New York is in the United States, where the headquarters are located. So such a high-profile visitor facing all these things does raise the needle of suspicion. But I think it, by the same token, if it's so high-profile, the United Nations and the U.S. own management, Secret Service and rest of them, would have taken care not to have such things. If they happened, this is the unfortunate coincidence to my mind. It doesn't smack of a conspiracy. What was to be gained by conspiring against Mr. Trump's arrival and teleprompter?
But 3 malfunctions back to back, the escalator not working, and then the teleprompter going black, going blank, and third is what he's claiming, that his speech was not heard. There was a problem with the loudspeakers that were present at the UNJ, although we were very clearly able to hear what the president was saying, his entire speech.
Well, to begin with, your own teleprompter was not working apparently in the beginning of this program. Do you ascribe to a conspiracy? These are technical instruments, and they are prone to sort of misbehave off and on.
Yeah.
So one would not like to pay too much of a credence. Of course, Mr. Trump has a set worldview. United Nations is a nuisance to him in terms of his priorities. He's stopped funding of many of the UN agencies and is quick to blame them for not doing enough, not being supportive enough for stopping 7 wars that he has managed all by himself, according to him, and so on and so forth. So this narrative of blaming conspiracies against his presence there fits into his own worldview, and his MAGA constituency would see it as a point of resistance by the entrenched bureaucracy in UN and the enemies of United States, etc. But to me, it looks like a bad coincidence.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sachdeva, for joining me, sharing your views. Shifting our focus to the other unfortunate news that has come in from Dallas in United States of America. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement office in Dallas was shot at by a single shooter, killing 2 detainees and seriously injuring others. The shooter has been found dead, reportedly with a self-inflicted gun wound, and has also now been identified as Joshua John. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem has stated that even more ICE agents and officers will be recruited in response to this incident, and the Trump administration has taken the position that anti-ICE propaganda spread by radical left is solely responsible for this attack.
So I also got to talk a little bit about another law and order problem. I said Charlie Kirk's assassination was the most political and disgusting violence that we've had in this country in the last couple of weeks. And that was true maybe until this morning, because I don't know if you all have followed the news, and we're still learning a little bit about it. But what we know is that in Dallas, Texas, an ICE facility, an Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility, was opened fire upon by a violent left-wing extremist, a person who wrote anti-ICE messaging on their bullets, and there's some evidence that we have that's not yet public, but we know this person was politically motivated. They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border. And I think that is the most disgusting thing. The very people who keep us safe ought to be honored and protected and praised by Democrats and Republicans alike. It is time to stop the rhetorical assault on law enforcement. Because here's what happens.
Jordan Cope is on the telecast with me. Jordan, quickly a response from you. It's perplexing, it's shocking what is happening in America. Every few weeks, there is an official, there is a leader, a political public figure that is shot down.
America is a big country. It's a country of over 320 million people. And unfortunately, with every country with a sizable population, one can probably reasonably expect tragic incidents like these happening every now and then. All of this being said, in the greater context of things, the fact that these two terrorist attacks, and I will call them terrorist attacks, have happened in recent weeks, really calls into question the unity and cohesion of the United States at this time. It's a very troubling time. However, I will add that the Trump administration and the Department of Homeland Security have recently released reports seeming to suggest that violent crime, even despite these recent terrorist attacks, is actually lower than in previous times. Apparently, a recent report released by the DHS suggests that violent crime is down 17% since the beginning of Trump's term. All of this being said, it's a very tragic time, and whatever one's politics are, one surely can realize that ICE detainees do not deserve to die. And it appears, though, however, that the terrorist involved in today's attacks, as indicated by one of his bullets that said anti-ICE on it, actually probably intended to target ICE agents as opposed to ICE detainees. All of this being said, a very tragic incident, and we await for more information to unravel. But what we do know right now is that apparently Mexican state officials have identified at least some of the victims as members of their own country, as citizens of their own country. And based on some local intel that I have managed to gather, even though one has died as a result of the gunshots, two apparently are in critical condition. Yes. And according to my local sources, they really are in critical condition and might not be expected to make it.
Yeah, talking about a big country with a large population, I don't see such incidents being commonplace in India with the largest population in the world. But keeping that aside, the Republicans and US President Donald Trump has taken to Truth Social. He said this is the work of the radical left Democrats. The same accusation that was made when Charlie Kirk was killed in that assassination that was obviously that happened 2 weeks ago. What are the chances at this point of time that a group at this point of time is being targeted? What is the evidence that it was in fact some radical left Democrats that were behind these two orchestrated attacks?
I don't necessarily think that both of these events have been targeted by one organization per se. I will say that Donald Trump has been actively working to designate the Antifa, the anti-fascist organization, as a terrorist group. All of this being said, the Charlie Kirk assassination not only was probably the biggest assassination in the United States in my lifetime, one of the most tragic as well, and what it really represented was an attack on conservative activists coming to college campuses trying to promote free speech. The symbolism of the assassination was almost just as tragic as the fact that his family was present at the time. And so it's very clearly a political assassination attempt. Charlie Kirk was a predominant figure amongst the conservative activist movement in America, seeking to promote dialogue, seeking to promote free speech, seeking to promote conservative ideals on campuses, which are frequently known to be bastions for leftist ideas and leftist movements. And unfortunately, he paid a very high price. And now today what we've seen is the attack in Dallas. It's very clear that it was politically motivated, as on one of the bullets, it clearly said anti-ICE. The assassin involved in today's attempt killed the people that he might have actually tried to protect. And that's unfortunately the danger and the tragedy of terrorism. It's reckless, it's irresponsible, and it's something we should condemn, regardless of whatever side it is occurring on. But I think both of these attacks also need to make us realize that perhaps it's time to talk about radicalism amongst leftist elements in the United States. And the fact that these attacks have occurred in a short period of time really calls into question what people are doing to stop leftist terrorism in the West that perhaps we've tolerated for far too long.
Okay, thank you, Jordan Cope, for sharing your views on this unfortunate event that has taken place in Dallas. Shifting our focus to the other big news, the U.S. Department of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control has sanctioned 2 Indian nationals for their role in supplying counterfeit prescription pills filled with fentanyl and other illicit drugs across the United States. The sanctioned individuals have been identified as Sadiq Abbas Habib Sayyed and Khazar Muhammad Iqbal Sheikh. However, there has been no response from the Indian government. The sanctions were coordinated with the Department of Justice, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and Homeland Security investigations. The Trump administration has taken a strong stance against the drug trade in America. Administrations have long accused foreign nationals of conducting illicit trade through the Mexican border. All right, that's the latest in the crackdown by the Trump administration on India and Indian nationals. And incidentally, there are 2 Indian nationals that were running a pharmacy and selling counterfeit drugs that were filled with fentanyl. These 2 Indian nationals have been sanctioned by United States. Do we have Jordan Cope on the telecast? There has been a massive crackdown that has been initiated by the Trump administration on drugs, illicit drugs, particularly fentanyl, that illegally cross the American border from Mexico. In fact, Canada at this point in time was also pulled up by the Trump administration for illicit fentanyl crossing into America. All right, shifting our focus to the other big news. The Houthis of Yemen have claimed responsibility for drone attacks on southern Israel, specifically targeting the city of Eilat. A Houthi military spokesperson confirmed that the drone air force carried out a military operation aimed at areas in Eilat. He also stated that the operation achieved its objectives and that Israeli interceptors failed to detect these drones. Reports from Israel state that the attack left at least 20 people injured, although there were no casualties that were reported. This exchange of attacks and counterattacks continues between Israel and Houthis amidst Israel's ongoing Gaza offensive.
نفذ سلاح الجو المسير في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية، وذلك بطائرتين مسيرتين استهدفتا هدفين للعدو الإسرائيلي في منطقة أم الرشراش جنوبية فلسطين المحتلة، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وفشلت المنظومات الاعتراضية في التصدي لها. وتعد هذه العملية هي الثانية خلال 24 ساعة الماضية، حيث نفذ سلاح الجو المسير عملية عسكرية في وقت سابق أمس الثلاثاء.
Denmark is facing growing concerns over unidentified drone activity. Authorities closed Aalborg Airport overnight after multiple drones were spotted in its airspace. The drones left just before 1 a.m. and the airport, which is used for both commercial and military flights, resumed operations later on. Flights were suspended for several hours, with 3 that were diverted. The police have confirmed the drone operators have not been identified and efforts to neutralize the drones were unsuccessful. A similar drone activity had earlier shut down Copenhagen Airport in what officials described as a serious attack on Denmark's critical infrastructure. New drone sightings have also been reported near airports in Esbjerg, Sonderborg and Skrydstrup, which is home to Denmark's F-16 and F-35 fighter jets. However, those airports remain open. The Danish armed forces and intelligence services are assisting in the investigation. Authorities are also coordinating with Norway and European partners. Police say there is no immediate danger to the public.
So our Prime Minister spoke yesterday, and we are in close contact with our very close friend and ally Denmark. We have not yet, investigation has not yet established a connection between the two, nor connecting to a particular country. But obviously, I think most people would say that two similar things happening at the same time, at least could suggest that there was a connection between them. We're neither confirming nor excluding that the two are connected. What we can say is that in this time of hybrid threats and potential hybrid warfare, these are exactly the things we have to look for, because the space between peace, pure peace, and full-scale war is a much more murky space, and we need to be alert and ready to connect the dots.
Professor Rohan Gunaratna on the telecast with me. Professor Gunaratna, how do you infer these increased number of drones that have been violating the airspace? First it was Poland and now Denmark.
Russian drones have violated Denmark, Poland, Romania, and Russian fighter jets violated Estonian airspace. So this is becoming a common feature now in the European theater of operations. NATO has responded by building capabilities. NATO partners, the British, the French, the Germans, Denmark, they have also taken certain measures to build capabilities. So what we are seeing is an escalation in the threat between Russia and Europe. And what is so important at this point is for President Trump, who met President Putin in Alaska, to move forward and to have a comprehensive resolution of the rising dispute between Russia and Europe. If this dispute is not resolved, there will be an escalation and there can even be war.
Absolutely. That's an interesting perspective, even as there is conversation, discourse that is taking place at the UNGA right now. Yesterday it was Volodymyr Zelensky who held who conducted that speech at the UNGA, talking about how it is essential to provide security guarantees to Kyiv in its fight against Moscow's, what he calls, onslaught and invasion. Stay on with me, Serge. We have more news coming in from Europe, from Eastern Europe. Poland is now set to reopen its border crossings with Belarus, ending a 2-week closure after the Zapad military exercises that were conducted jointly by Russia and Belarus. Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced the decision, citing that security threats and economic concerns for Polish carriers and railways have reduced. The closure imposed on September 12th came after an unprecedented incursion of Russian drones into the Polish airspace. Additionally, the European Commission had expressed concerns over the impact on trade, with the closure affecting 25 billion euros worth of goods going via railways between European Union and China. While border operations resume, Tusk warned that Poland remains prepared to act swiftly if tensions escalate. Professor Rohan, interesting to see this development where Poland at this point of time has opened its borders, allowed for trains to pass between Belarus and Poland. Belarus has been a strong ally and a staunch supporter of Russia in the war between Moscow and Kyiv. How complicated does the relationship between the European Union countries that are bordering Belarus and Russia is going to be henceforth?
Belarus is an ally of Russia. For 2 weeks, the Russian troops exercised with the Belarus military on Belarus soil. And that's why Romania closed the border for 2 weeks. Prime Minister Tusk has very clearly said that he has now opened the border, and because they need to restore the traffic, the movement of goods and services between these two countries. So China and European Union, they do a lot of trade, and that trade, the land route is, of course, Belarus. They have something like 25 billion euros worth of trade. The sea trade is 732 billion euros. What we are seeing is that this closure for 2 weeks impacted on trade. It impacted on the relationship that they are trying to establish between with Belarus. So I think that what is so important is for governments to talk and to resolve these disputes. If there is no dialogue, then of course there will be escalation that will lead to war.
Professor Gunaratna, thank you very much for joining me on the telecast. Typhoon Ragasa has caused widespread disruption in some regions across southern China. In Hong Kong, waves led to widespread flooding throughout the city. Schools and flights were suspended while emergency personnel conducted rescue operations for hundreds of residents in Macau. In Guangdong province, people were relocated as the typhoon made landfall near Yangjiang city. Transportation services and manufacturing facilities were temporarily suspended in several cities, with tens of millions of yuan allocated for relief and recovery efforts. Meanwhile, Taiwan's fire department said that 14 people died following devastating flooding in Hualien County. Heavy rains caused a barrier like in the mountains to overflow, causing significant disruption. A 6.3 magnitude earthquake has struck northwestern Venezuela. The U.S. Geological Survey has stated the epicenter of the quake was 15 miles east of Yemen Houthis in Zulia state. The agency also reported that the earthquake had a depth of 5 miles. The tremors were felt in the neighboring country of Colombia as well. As the quake shook, many residents evacuated residential and office buildings and poured into the streets. So far, no damage has been reported. Yemen Houthis is located on the eastern coast of Lake Maracaibo, an important site for Venezuela's oil industry. Well, with that, we come to the end of this bulletin of the World Report. Stay tuned on NewsX World for more news and updates.